Today, I'm going to share with you 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I'm going to share with you the picture that is famously associated with them. But before I get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please convince the like button to go camping on their own on Mount Shasta. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 1970, 14-year-old Keith Sapsford was living in Sydney, Australia with his parents, and he was desperate to travel the world. His parents wanted him to be able to travel, they just lacked the resources to be able to afford that kind of thing. However, they were able to pull a little bit of cash, and the 3 of them did go on a nice European vacation that his parents were hoping would kind of calm down his desires to want to travel all the time. They thought this would be, a taste before he got older and he could go travel as much as he wanted. But when he came back from that vacation, it really had the opposite effect. It was like Keith had experienced the life that he so desperately wanted, and now he's home and it's like that life has been taken from him. Following that vacation, Keith began trying to run away from home. Not because he didn't want to be around his parents, but just because he saw it as his only way to, see the world. But every time he would run away, his parents would quickly find him and bring him back home. Their concern for their son would only grow, though, because he would find ways to sneak away and be gone for longer and longer stretches of time, and they're thinking it's only a matter of time before he really gets hurt. In an effort to save their son, they ended up enrolling him in this very strict boarding school that was for boys with behavioral problems. And they were hoping that the staff at the school was going to be able to kind of calm their son down and keep him from trying to run away all the time. But unfortunately, the school really had the opposite effect, because the school, in a sense, was like a prison. You weren't allowed to leave. And so immediately, Keith, when he gets there, he's looking for ways to escape this boarding school. And 2 weeks after arriving, he would be successful. He would elude the staff and he would escape. 3 days after he had escaped this boarding school, he found his way to the Sydney airport. Now, this is the 1970s, and it was far easier to get into an airport than it would be today, where there's lots of security. There wasn't much of that at the time that Keith was at the airport. And so Keith walked across the tarmac to a plane that was bound for Tokyo, and he climbed inside the wheel well. He tucked himself in there and he waited for takeoff. A photographer named John Gilpin happened to be at the Sydney airport on the same day that Keith is now snuck into that wheel well, and he had a new lens for his camera that he was testing out. And at one point, he was just taking pictures of the tarmac, and he began taking pictures of a plane that was taking off, and it was the same plane that Keith had snuck into. And he takes pictures of it as it takes off, it goes up to altitude, and it flies away. And he just took a series of pictures of it, puts his camera away, doesn't think twice about it. A week later, John was looking through his photos, and he stopped when he saw this picture. John had inadvertently captured the final moments of Keith as he fell nearly 200 feet to his death. As soon as the pilot took off, the wheels were retracted, opening up that wheel well for a brief second, and there was nothing for Keith to hold on to, and he slipped out. But even if he had not fallen out, he almost certainly would have died from freezing temperatures and lack of oxygen at altitude. On April 1st, 1990, a police officer in Arizona was driving on the highway when he saw a tractor trailer that was pulled over on the side of the road with its hazards on. And so he pulls over, he gets out, walks out to the driver's side door, and he looks up at the driver and says, "Hey, do you need any help?" And the driver is still sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. He's barely acknowledging the police officer. And he kind of looks down and shrugs and just says, "No, I'm okay." The police officer doesn't know what it was, but there was something off about this guy. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but there was something off about him. He couldn't tell what it was. So he asked him again, "Are you sure that nothing is wrong?" And the driver, again, very sketchy, just says, "No, nothing's wrong." And so the police officer, acting on a gut instinct, says, "Hey, can you step out? Do you mind if I talk to you outside of your vehicle?" And so very reluctantly, the driver kind of slithers his way out of the vehicle, making sure that he doesn't fully open the door to kind of let the officer see what's going on inside his cab. He gets out and shuts the door, and the two start talking. Over the course of their conversation, where basically the officer is trying to figure out what you're doing here. Why are you parked on the side of the road with your hazards on? Why aren't you telling me what's going on? Why are you acting so strange? At some point, the officer just kind of had enough, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to need to search your vehicle." He opens up the door and goes inside, and there's nothing out of the ordinary in the front 2 seats. But when he looks into the back section where there was a sleeping compartment, because this is a big 18-wheeler and there's like a little area in the back of the cab where these guys doing these long drives can sleep. When he looks into that section, he sees there's this woman with her mouth gagged, handcuffed, huddling in the corner of this sleeping section, looking absolutely terrified. The officer immediately gets out and he grabs the guy and he puts him under arrest. As he's arresting him, the driver is saying, no, she wants to be here. She chose to be here. But the officer didn't buy it and he said, you're under arrest for kidnapping. The officer puts this guy in his cruiser and shuts the door, and then he calls for backup. When backup arrived, they were able to take the woman out. She was unhurt. She survived. But it would turn out that she was one of the very, very lucky few, because the driver was Robert Rhodes, aka the truck stop killer, who over the previous 20 years had killed over 50 women. He was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. But the crime that the truck stop killer was actually known for was not this kidnapping where this woman survived. It was the kidnapping and murder of a woman named Regina K. Walters. Regina was a young woman who came from a broken home, and at the age of 14, she ran away and began hitchhiking across Texas with her boyfriend. In February of 1990, Rhodes picked up Regina and her boyfriend, who were looking for a ride. Rhodes almost immediately kills Regina's boyfriend and takes Regina captive, and he keeps her chained up in his traveling torture chamber for several years before ultimately killing her as well. After Rhodes was finally arrested by this Arizona police officer on the side of the highway, the investigation searched Rhodes' house, and they found some pictures. This is a picture of Regina K. Walters in the abandoned barn where her body was ultimately found. Immediately after Rhodes took this picture, he ended Regina's life. On September 6, 1992, two moose hunters that were hunting just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska were walking up to a well-known landmark amongst hunters in the area. It was this old school bus that was parked in the middle of nowhere. It was all rusted over and nature had practically overgrown it. And hunters, trappers, and travelers would use this bus as kind of like a center point that you would reference where you're going relative to this particular bus. But when they walked up to it, they saw on the outside of the door that there was a note. Attention possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out of here. I am all alone. This is not a joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. Dated August ? 5 months earlier, in April of 1992, Chris McCandless, the one who wrote that note, had hitchhiked from Carthage, South Dakota to Fairbanks, Alaska. Once there, he hitchhiked again with an electrician named Jim Gallion, who was making his way out of Fairbanks. Chris introduced himself as Alex and asked Jim if he would take him to Denali National Park, which is about 2 hours away to the southwest. On the drive, Jim asked Chris what he was going to be doing at the park, because this is like wild Alaska country. And frankly, Chris did not look like a rugged Alaskan outdoorsman. Chris told Jim that he was going to be living off the land for a few months. Jim would later say that he had serious doubts about Chris's ability to survive in the Alaskan bush. As it was, Chris only had a light backpack, he did have a rifle, but he really didn't have warm clothes on. He only had 10 pounds of rice. That was the only thing he brought for food. He didn't have a compass, he didn't have a map, he didn't have a watch. He just seemed totally ill-equipped for what he was saying he was going to go do. At some point, Jim tried to convince Chris not to go, or to at least postpone, and he even offered, hey, I'll drive you up to Anchorage and I'll buy you equipment. You need the right equipment for what you're going to be doing. Let's go there first. But Chris was stubborn, and so Jim ultimately relented and said, okay. He drove him to the park. Before Chris left, Jim actually gave him a pair of warm boots that he had in his truck. He said, here, you can use these more than I can. And Chris thanked him, took his boots, and he was on his way. Although Chris was planning for this extensive hike through Denali National Park all the way to the Bering Sea, but Chris would only make it about 20 miles into his journey before stopping at an old rusted bus just outside of the park. Chris would live in this bus for 16 weeks, and according to his diary, that first week he was there was particularly rough. He was snowed in, he couldn't catch anything to eat, so he's hungry and cold. But shortly thereafter, he developed a routine. He was able to hunt successfully for some small game. He found some plants that were good to eat, and by and large, his entries made it seem like he was very happy. However, the last month of diary entries really painted a very different picture. After living in this bus for nearly 3 months, he indicated in his diary that he was kind of sick and tired of living off the land, and he was ready to return back to society. So on July 3rd, he packs up his camp, And he starts walking back the 20 miles towards where he came into the park in the first place. But when he came into the park 3 months earlier, the river that he was going to need to cross was frozen. And now that he's returning in the summer, it had thawed, and now it's the 75-foot wide raging river that was basically impossible to cross. And so he's trapped on the wrong side of this river. What he didn't know, because he didn't have a compass, he didn't have a map, he didn't know the area well, was there was actually a hand-operated tram that would take you across the river in the summer that was only a mile away from his camp, that was labeled on almost every map. In addition, there was a hunting cabin not far from that tram that's also on just about every map of this particular area. That had food, it had clothes, it had bedding. He could have stayed in this hunting cabin until conditions were okay again to make the journey back home. But again, he doesn't have a map, so he doesn't know these things exist. So at some point, he turns around and goes back to the bus, feeling totally dejected. That night, his journal entry just said, "Reined in, river looks impossible, lonely, scared." All of Chris's diary entries following his return to the bus after not being able to cross this river got shorter and bleaker and really painted a picture of a guy that was going downhill. The final entry in Chris's diary just says, "Beautiful blue berries." And then 19 days after his final entry is when those two moose hunters find this bus and see the note, the SOS note, pinned to the outside. The hunters go inside the bus, and there, laying in a sleeping bag, is the body of Christopher McCandless. Although it's not entirely clear how Christopher actually died, the two most common theories are either starvation or perhaps he ingested a poisonous plant seed. The hunters alerted authorities who came out and they launched an investigation, and during this investigation they found Chris's camera. Chris was an avid photographer. He had taken loads of pictures over the course of his stay out in the wild. This is the final picture that he took on his camera. It's evident from Chris's SOS note on his door that he did want to escape. He wanted to leave the wild. But what's also clear is that at the end, he realized he wasn't going to. The note he's holding in his hand says, "I have had a happy life, and thank the Lord, goodbye, and may God bless all." So he took one last dignified picture of himself before curling up in his sleeping bag, then passing away. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments section, and I will pin the best comment at the top. If you enjoyed today's story and you haven't done this already, please tell the like button to go camping on their own on Mount Shasta. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is MrBallen. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit. It's just called Mr. Ballen. It's linked in the description below. If I use your suggestion on purpose, I will credit you. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, that's going to do it. See ya. What do you think, alligator boy?
Right. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely gonna have shadow.
Okay.
Alright.
Full send.
Come on, buddy. Good morning.
Every year, hundreds of people go missing inside of national parks and forests all over North America. Of those hundreds, there's always a few that baffle investigators because either they go missing under very strange circumstances, like they were right in front of someone, they were talking to someone, and then, in a second they're gone, or where they're discovered doesn't make any sense, that they've covered a distance that is too far for them to have covered, or they're in locations that are just physically impossible to get to. One man is making it his mission to research these very strange disappearances. His name is David Paulides. He's a former police detective. He covers all of these cases in his book series called Missing 411. I went out and bought all of them. They're incredible. He has a YouTube channel called the Can-Am Missing Project. That's linked below in the description. And so today I'm going to share 3 missing person cases that have all been covered by David Paulides in Missing 411. And hopefully by the end of this video, you're just as interested in the Missing 411 phenomenon that David Paulides has brought to light. And hopefully you'll go over to his channel, the Can-Am Missing Project, and you'll give them a follow because he has poured tens of thousands of hours into this. Without David Paulides, there would be no Missing 411 project, and many people that go missing would just be forgotten about. So shout out to David Paulides for keeping their memories alive and keeping the public engaged in something that is truly baffling and needs more attention. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. If that's of interest to you, then please sneak into the Like Button's house and replace all of their salt shakers with sugar. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. So just a couple of weeks ago, early on July 24th, 2020, an 18-year-old woman named Gia Fuda, who was living with her parents in Seattle, Washington, wakes up in their home, goes downstairs, says good morning to her mother and to her father. She has a sip of a seltzer water, and then she heads out to her car and says, okay, I'll see you tonight, and she drives off. Gia's mother said that because of the quarantine, all of Gia's college classes had been moved online, and Gia didn't like doing all of her work in the house. She felt trapped. And so her routine consisted of getting up early and heading to Bellevue College, which is just outside of Seattle, where she could do some work in their library, do her online courses there, and then come back sometime in the evening. And so Gia's parents assumed that's what she was doing that day. But when Gia left that morning, she did not follow her typical COVID-19 routine of going to Bellevue College to do schoolwork. Instead, she hopped on the highway and she drove 60 miles to a very rural part of Washington state. It's very heavily forested. It's called Index, Washington. And she gets picked up on a camera inside of a coffee shop where she gets a cup of coffee and she buys a Bigfoot keychain and then gets back in her car and drives another 30 miles away from Seattle, away from her parents' home. It's unclear where she's going until her car runs out of gas. And when she ran out of gas, it was like she wasn't prepared for it, because she was only able to turn her car and barely pull off of Highway 2. It didn't look like she'd intentionally parked. And it's actually how investigators spotted it, because it was jutting out into the road slightly. She gets out, and instead of walking on the highway to try to get help or trying to flag down another motorist, she grabs her cell phone, her Bible, and a journal and turns and starts walking directly uphill. There's like this mountain right next to the highway, and it's very densely forested. And she just starts walking straight up this mountain. It's important to note that David Paulides just recently came out with a video about this case on his Can-Am Missing Project channel. And he says that the area she stopped in is an area where at least a dozen other people have gone missing under baffling circumstances that have all been covered in the Missing 411 phenomenon. By 11:30 that night, Gia's parents were starting to get very concerned that they hadn't heard from their daughter and that she hadn't come home yet. They started texting her and calling her. No answer, no response. By 1 a.m., they called the police. So this huge search is launched to go find Gia. Hundreds of volunteers. They have all these professional search and rescue people out there. They have helicopters overhead. And almost immediately, within a few hours of the search being launched, they find her car on Highway 2. But no sign of her anywhere. The area that she was in was actually a dead zone for cell phone service, so they couldn't get in touch with her, in part because they had no service, and authorities weren't able to track her phone because there was no cell phone reception. So they didn't have much to work with, except that they generally knew where she might be, which is in this very thick section of the Cascade Mountains. And so for days and days, they're searching and turning up nothing. And unfortunately, as time ticks on, the likelihood of her being found alive is next to zero. But 7 days into this huge search where nothing has been turned up, they have this huge find. A couple of the searchers that were miles away from where she had gone missing. I mean, at this point, you're 7 days into the search. You have searchers combing miles and miles of territory, and there's nothing. They found nothing. And these searchers are up near this scenic creek, where there's a little bit of a clearing, there's this creek, and they find in one area her jacket, her shoes, her phone, her journal, and her Bible, all in one area. It looked like she had just suddenly stripped everything she had, put it on the ground, but she was nowhere to be found. So while this find is certainly great progress towards discovering what happened, it unfortunately sent a message to her parents that at this point, you need to brace for the worst, because now your daughter is not only missing and has been for a week, she doesn't have any gear. She has no clothes, she has no phone, she's just gone and has nothing. So the omen was very bad at this point. But her family and the searchers were not willing to give up, so they continued to search this new area where all of her stuff had been found for another 2 days. And on the 9th day from when she had gone missing, they found her, and she was alive. She was sitting on a rock near this creek. When they approached her, she was very startled to see people coming near her. She clearly was not expecting to be found. She was also more or less incoherent. She believed she had only been out for maybe 3 days and just had gotten lost, but they told her she had been gone for 9 days. But she was unhurt. She had a couple scratches on her. She was definitely emaciated, but she had been drinking from the stream and eating huckleberries, so she was, taking care of herself, but she was totally confused. She didn't know why she was there. And when she was pressed a little bit further, she didn't know why she drove where she drove. She doesn't know why she walked up a very steep mountain into the Cascades. She also has no idea what happened over the first 6-7 days. She only recalled the last couple and thought that's the whole time she had been out there. So it's a very confusing story, and one that probably we will never get a clear answer to. This will just become another one of the thousands of very odd disappearances that occur all over North America, except at least in this case, she was found alive. Tom Mezek was this salty Army veteran. He had served in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is an elite paratrooper division. He taught survival training classes, but more than anything, he loved to hunt. And he actually hunted in this one particular area in New York all the time with the same group of friends. In fact, for like 55 years, Tom and his 6 hunter friends would hunt this one area. On November 15th, 2015, Tom and his hunting buddies decide to go hunt in this area. And they got a bit of a late start. They didn't get out there till about noon. So they decided, in order to make up for lost time, to use this technique that's referred to as a deer drive, where you have stationary watchers that set up on a line about 100 meters apart from one another, and you have a group of drivers that kind of corral any deer or any animals in the area and push them so that they go past the watchers who can take a shot at those animals. And so Tom, along with 3 other hunters, were made watchers, and they set up along this hillside where Tom was all the way on the left flank, which meant on his left were no hunters. He did have a hunter 100 meters to his right, and then there was 2 other hunters all the way up the hill on the right as well, but he was on the outer flank of that line. And the 3 other hunters that were going to be doing the driving were to his right as well, behind this hill. They were going to try to push the deer up and over this hill down to this line of watchers. After 3 hours and no luck, they haven't seen one deer, they start to also comment on the fact that there doesn't seem to be any wildlife at all. No squirrels, no birds, no anything. There's just silence, which is very odd for this area. And when you consider that this group has hunted this area for 55 years, they have a really good understanding of what normal looks like. And before anything happened with Tom, they were already talking about how strange that was. Also, one of the watchers who was right next to where Tom was, about 100 meters away, he recalled hearing a very distinct sound, like a whooshing sound or a snapping sound, coming generally from where Tom was. But he didn't think much of it at the time. That is, until they got back to their cars after calling off the hunt because they had been unsuccessful, and everyone's there except for Tom. And they go back out, they're yelling for Tom, they're wondering, did he fall down? They're like, okay, let's radio him, because everybody had radios. There's no answer from Tom. They're searching the area where he was. They start shooting their rifles into the air. They can't find him, and they think, okay, well, we don't know what he's doing, but this guy is super competent. He was healthy. Let's just go to the cars and wait for him. And so they're sitting at the parking lot, which is not very far from where they were hunting. And this is an area they always parked in, and this is an area they always hunted in. So they knew that Tom knows where they're going to be. And so they sat there waiting, and he's just not showing up. So eventually, the hunters call it in to the rangers that he's gone missing. A massive search is launched for Tom. I mean, they are combing this area. They got helicopters, professional search teams. They're looking in lakes. They're looking under logs. They're looking everywhere. And there's not a shred of evidence of Tom. They can't find his walkie-talkie. They can't find his gun. There's no clothes. There's nothing. He's just disappeared. On the 4th day of the search, the FBI shows up and they get involved in the search, which didn't make any sense, because why is the FBI getting involved 4 days into a search for an elderly hunter where there's no sign of foul play? Why are they getting involved? It didn't really add up. And all they would tell Tom's wife is that they believed that something was off about this case, and that's why they were there. But they couldn't elaborate unless more information came in. But nothing ever shows up. Even though Tom was a bit older, He literally taught survival classes. He was the guy teaching other people how to survive in the woods. He also has been hunting in that particular area for 55 years. How is it that he in no way was able to signal that something was wrong, and that all these people, including the FBI, can't find any trace of him? It just seems like something is off. I gotta agree with the FBI on this one. In 2013, 51-year-old Dale Stelling decided to take a trip from Texas, where he lived with his wife and his parents, up to Colorado. He was an avid outdoorsman, and he had always wanted to go hiking and camping in Colorado. So he, his wife, and his parents load up the RV and they start making their way up to Colorado. On June 9th, as they're making their way to Colorado, their RV breaks down in New Mexico. Even though they were eager to get to Colorado, Dale saw that where they had broken down was near the Mesa Verde National Park. And he thought, well, we weren't planning this, but let's just stay here for a night and go check out the park tomorrow. Then we'll get the RV fixed and we'll be on our way to Colorado. And so they all agree. They stay the night, and the next morning they head over to Mesa Verde National Park. It was a very hot day that day, and Dale's wife was overweight and not very healthy, and his parents were very elderly. So when they got to the park, they ended up just sitting at the visitor center, and no one really wanted to actually go walk around. But Dale was an avid hiker, and he didn't like the idea of just sitting around all day. And so at some point, Dale just says, hey, I'm gonna go stretch my legs and walk this trail here down to the abandoned city ruins. There was this city that had been built into the cliff that lots of tourists would go check out. And so his wife and his parents, they don't bat an eye. They say, okay, we'll see you in a little bit. And Dale was off. Dale made it seem like it was going to be a very quick trip. And so when he didn't return in 2 hours, his family decided to tell rangers and say, hey, our husband, our son, he went hiking down that trail there towards the ruins, and we haven't heard from him. We can't get in touch with him on the phone. Can you guys go look for him? The rangers actually were not concerned at all. They said that we've never had anybody go missing from To this day, we have no idea where Dale is. There's been no shred of evidence to indicate where he went. He just vanished. If you enjoyed today's story, if you haven't already, please sneak into the like button's house and replace all of their salt shakers with sugar. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. So I'd love to get your reaction to these 3 stories. What do you think happened and why? And I'll do my best to get back to as many of you as I possibly can. If you're interested in learning more about the missing 411 phenomenon as documented by David Paulides, then you should check out David Politis and his team at their YouTube channel, the Can-Am Missing Project. I've also provided links in the description below to all of their work. Also, I have a Missing 411 playlist that you can save and watch that as well. If you have a story suggestion for me to use on this channel, go to our subreddit, which is just MrBallen. It's linked below. It's a place where you can drop your story suggestions, and if I intentionally use your suggestion, I will absolutely credit you. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram. My username is JohnBallen416. Also, I'm very active on TikTok, where my handle is MrBallen. So whether I see you on Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, some combination, just know I'm incredibly thankful for your support, and until next time, see ya. The paranormal does not really have a place in the military, despite what anybody tells you. It's just not something that gets discussed. Now, I was a bit of an anomaly. I was in the Navy for 7 years. 5 of those years were spent on a SEAL team, and maybe because we were in such small teams, people had to put up with my weirdness, my interest in, the strange happenings around the world. But, really that was an anomaly. And I think it comes from the culture inside the military, where you have a group of people that has such a intense job that's so rooted on practical approaches to problem solving. There is no time to be theorizing about how demons and ghosts and things that are out of this world are having an impact, because we need to focus on what's happening right now in front of us. There's no space for anything else. And so when you do hear stories coming out of the military that are paranormal in nature, it isn't that you should inherently believe them, but rather you should understand that if they have come to the conclusion that this is paranormal, they have ruled out virtually everything else. And so today I'm going to share a military paranormal story that happened in Afghanistan in 2009 when 8 US Marines were stationed at this very isolated observation post in the middle of Helmand province. And some very strange things happened out there that the Marines that were there believe are still plaguing them to this day. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, I would encourage you to play Ding Dong Ditch on the like button's house, and then also subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. In June of 2009, US and NATO forces surged into Afghanistan. Troop numbers escalated dramatically in preparation for this massive offensive against the Taliban. During this surge, a very small team of Marines, 8 Marines, were given a mission to go to an observation post in Helmand province, where a group of British soldiers were stationed at the time. An observation post, or OP as it's called in the military, is any location where you're able to observe, hence the name. Most OPs, if not all OPs, are located on high ground because that provides you the best view. OPs are very strategically valuable. You have the higher ground and you can see what's going on around you. And so as a result, OPs become prime targets for attack. Now, the OP that these Marines were going to, OP Rock, was a little bit unique. It was strategically very important, but it didn't really have the higher ground. All around it were other large pieces of terrain, which meant if you poke your head up for too long, you might get shot from a sniper on the mountain. And so OP Rock was like a very dangerous and isolated place to be. Not to mention laughably small and had almost no amenities. It was basically a couple of HESCO barriers, those big brown squares that get filled with sand and dirt to stop bullets. And then, not even cots. They slept literally on the ground on sleeping pads and a couple of ghillie tents overhead. That was about it. And so these Marines were going to be there for 60 days, where they were not going to be able to go anywhere. They were just isolated and stuck on this tiny little wasteland in the middle of Afghanistan. The 8 Marines were led by Sergeant Green, and his second in command was Corporal Lena. The other 6 junior Marines were Zolik, Hoyt, Wilson, Parker, Smith, and Gibbs. After driving their up-armored vehicles all the way through the snaking pass, they get to OP Rock, and the British soldiers are there anxiously waiting for them. Normally, anytime you turn over with any other unit, you do something called turnover operations, where because you're new to the area, you want to go out and do like a presence patrol or something to get a feel for the area with the people who have been there to kind of give you a lay of the land and say, hey, look out for this area. We think there's IEDs over there. Remember, if you're over here, you're in plain sight of the enemy. They can shoot you. But when they got there, the British were so anxious to leave. They did not do turnover ops. The British just looked totally weathered and beaten down and ragged, like they'd been fighting at OP Rock for decades. They'd only been there for 60 days, the same amount of time that these Marines are about to be there. And before they leave, one of the British soldiers turns and says, hey, just so you know, if you dig anything up here, just put it back. And the Marines look at him like, what are you talking about? And he doesn't elaborate. He just says again, if you dig anything up, just put it back. Trust me. So that night, the men have settled into their new home for the next 60 days. And the way it works on any base in the world, but certainly in a war zone, is there's always someone manning a guard post. And so the first night, it happened to be Corporal Lena's turn to be on watch. Corporal Lena is the second in command of these 8 Marines. And he was up in the guard tower, and you got to put yourself in his mind, okay? Even if you've never been to Afghanistan, just imagine being out in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of a mountainous desert with no village, no people, no anything. But at the same time, you are hanging it out there. You are totally exposed. There are people in the mountains around you that want to kill you, for sure. And it's you and 7 other sleeping people right in your little tiny OP. All you got is a radio where you can call back to your main base that's far enough away that if something bad happened, you better hope that 1, you can get through to them, and 2, they can get over here as quickly as they can. And the great fear when you're in these remote locations is that you're going to get ambushed. There's so many stories about these complex attacks being launched on these small little outposts where all of a sudden groups like these 8 Marines just get totally overrun by the Taliban. So it's a terrifying thing. When I was in Afghanistan, I didn't stand all that much guard duty, but when I did, you're up in the shack and you're kind of looking out into this like vast expanse of kind of nothingness. And you're wondering, like, are people watching me right now? You know, is someone taking aim at me right now? I mean, you're protected and you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but nighttime in Afghanistan, standing guard duty, it's very eerie. And so this first night, Lena is up there, it's very quiet, and his radio that's right next to him, like imagine like a big walkie-talkie, right? Military grade radio, it starts crackling. Military radios, at least American military radios, are from the 1950s, and they've basically not changed. They're very durable and they work, but it's not uncommon for them to falter, and that's why we have people that specialize in just radios that can fix these things for us. Because if you lose your line of communication, you're screwed. And so he's sitting there and he starts hearing crackling on the radio. And so he notices it, but he doesn't think much of it. And the crackling stops and he's looking out into the mountainside and he's kind of looking around and just doing his typical guard duty. Then the crackling picks up again and he thinks he can hear someone speaking in the radio. It didn't sound like English. It didn't sound like even words necessarily, but it was a little bit louder. Now he's really paying attention to it. Because he was worried his radio might be going bad, he first took the battery off, looked at it, blew it off, reconnected the battery, rebooted it, and put it back down. And he's a little more keyed into his radio. And then a couple minutes later, he hears this crackling, and now he can clearly hear someone's voice. And it sounds like Russian. He thinks someone is speaking in Russian. This is an encrypted radio. You're not picking up random signals all over the place. You only are picking up people that have your crypto. And it doesn't make any sense to pick up somebody else's voice. This has to be someone on your team. And so he thinks, okay, I'll check in with the main base because my guys are all asleep right here. They're all sleeping right there, 7 of them. There's no beds. They're laying on the ground right there. I can count them. No one's on the radio. So he picks up the radio and he calls into the main base and he says, hey, is anybody pushing traffic out this way to OP Rock? And like right away, they get a response from the main base that says, no, we're not pushing or receiving traffic. Lena's not terrified about this, but he's like, okay, there's something going on with the radio. The crackling and gurgling and weird sounds would persist throughout the night to the point where the next morning when the next guard came on duty, he said, hey, I think there's something strange going on with the radio. You should probably go switch it out and get somebody else's radio while you're up here. Lena's relieved of guard duty and he goes down to check on the other Marines. And at this point, everybody's awake and, you know, it's the start of their first full day at OP Rock. And because they have nothing else to do besides defend it, they start taking stock of how well fortified is it, what are some ways that we can improve this place, and they notice that there's a trench dug around the inside of OP Rock, basically right up against the HESCOs, that allows anyone to stand and not be jutting out of the OP and run the risk of getting shot by a sniper. And they're looking at it and they're thinking to themselves, it's not deep enough. It's maybe a couple feet down. You're certainly not going to be able to stand on this trench. You'll totally be exposed. And they thought, why didn't the British, who were here for 60 days, why didn't they dig a deeper trench? And so Lena and the rest of the Marines decide they're going to spend that day digging the trench a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. As they're digging, Lena hits something metal in the trench. And he pulls it out, and it's like this metal stake, like an engineering stake. And he brushes off the dirt on the stake, and he's looking at it, and he can see some foreign writing, and it looks like Russian writing. And he's thinking to himself, oh, that's not that weird. Back in the 80s, the Russians were here. And it's totally possible that they may have left some of their gear here and they got buried. About 10 meters away from Lena is one of the younger Marines named Wilson, who's digging. And at some point, he hits the ground and like a pocket in the soil opens up. And he sees there's some pottery and some pieces of what look like ceramics that are inside of this hole. And after pulling out some of the plates and pots, they pull out a huge human bone, a femur, or leg bone. They ultimately decide to tuck the leg bone back into where it was, and they stop digging in that area, and they continue to dig in the other sections of the trench. But they couldn't dig more than a couple inches before running into more human remains. And by the end of the day, they had unearthed dozens of skeletons inside of this trench. And so they realized that this is probably what the British meant when they said, if you dig something up, put it back. A couple of weeks go by, and the Marines at this point have accepted that they live in a very creepy place. And on day 13 of being at OP Rock, Hoyt, who had just turned 20 years old, is up on guard duty. As he's sitting there, he starts getting this really uncomfortable feeling that someone is right behind him. And so at one point, he turns around to look at what's behind him, basically looking back into the camp itself. And now, coming from outside the wire where he had just been looking, he hears this horrible, blood-curdling scream. He turns around and he's looking out. He's got his night vision goggles on. He's looking around for anything. And all of a sudden, a couple hundred meters away, he sees a man running between one bush to another bush. Now, they know that at any time they could get attacked. So they're not thinking that this could be anything other than the Taliban coming to attack them. And so the other Marines have jumped up because they heard the scream, and they're looking to Hoyt to be like, what's going on? Hoyt is saying to them, I got a guy, he's about 200 meters away. I just saw him running right to left. Lena runs over to the edge of the HESCO, and he raises his rifle with a thermal imager on it. He's looking out, and there's no heat signature out there. It's totally cold. There's no animals, there's no people, certainly there's nothing. And Lena is yelling to Hoyt, where is he? Where do I need to look? And Hoyt's saying, he's right there. I just saw him go behind that bush. But Lena is looking out and he can't see anything on thermal. And he's like, I don't see anything. There's no one out there. The Marines also had a dog that they inherited from the British soldiers that had been there. Her name was Ugly Betty. They loved Ugly Betty. They took care of her, and she was apparently really good at identifying when people were coming towards the OP. So she was a great watchdog. And this whole time, she had been looking in the same direction that Hoyt had seen this figure, and she is barking like a maniac. And even after they're looking with thermal and they can't see anyone out there, they can't get Betty to calm down. She's completely transfixed on the area where Hoyt had seen this figure. So for the rest of the night, the Marines are totally on guard, anticipating at any moment that they're going to get attacked. Someone's going to take a shot, they're going to throw a grenade in, because we lost this guy who was right there in front of us. So eventually, the next day, when they didn't get attacked, they just kind of said, okay, and they moved on and just figured it was an anomaly. Another couple of weeks later, on day 26, Zolik, who's another one of the younger Marines, was on guard duty, and it was really hot. He remembers even taking his helmet off because he was sweating so bad. And then at some point, while he's just looking out into the vast open nothingness, he said that the temperature dropped inside of the shack dramatically. So much so that he actually felt cold. There was no breeze. There was no reason for it to be getting cold. And as he's thinking to himself, like, is there a storm coming in or a cold front coming in? He starts feeling like someone's standing behind him. And he keeps looking over his shoulder and no one's there. He's in this tiny little shack. And he's feeling creeped out. And all of a sudden he starts hearing whispering from behind him. not on the radio, but like in the shack with him. And he keeps turning around and he keeps thinking, like, am I hearing things? Am I losing my mind? And he starts hearing footsteps on the roof of his shack. And that's when he thinks, oh, Smith, who was the kind of class clown of the group, is playing a joke on him. And he must be whispering outside. I bet he climbed up on top and he's screwing him. So he jumps out of the shack and looks up, expecting to see Smith standing on the roof of the guard shack. But no one's on the guard shack. At this point, Zolik's pretty spooked. He does a quick search on either side of the guard shack, thinking maybe Smith is there, but no one's there. And then he turns around and, of course, sees that the other 7 Marines are all asleep. So it wasn't Smith. It wasn't any of his teammates. At this point, he goes back in the shack and he raises his rifle and he's looking through his thermal scope. So any human would light up like a Christmas tree if you saw them on a thermal. And he's scanning outside all around, thinking, did I hear someone who's out there? Because they had that weird run-in 2 weeks earlier with that random person that they could never find. He's thinking maybe there's somebody else out here. And as he's scanning, he sees a man standing a couple hundred meters away with his fist raised like this. Zolik was so caught off guard from the way he was standing that he actually lowered his rifle to look because the moon was pretty bright. The illumination was pretty good. And he looked, you couldn't really see him again, so he brought his rifle back up. And now through his thermal, the figure was gone. Zolik in interviews has admitted that he was really stressed out about being at OP Rock. He was really down. I think of all the Marines there, he was depressed. He did not want to be there. He felt like he was experiencing real combat fatigue. And he thought at this moment that he's losing his mind between the whispering and the footsteps on the roof and seeing this person with his fist raised. And so instead of telling people that he had potentially just seen this person out along the perimeter of their OP, he started to convince himself that you're just losing your mind. You're stressed and you're hallucinating. You just got to calm down. For the rest of the night, he would not see the figure on his thermal or anybody out there, but he would hear whispering behind him. He kept hearing footsteps on the roof, but he would go out and no one would be there. So by the time the sun came up, he really thought that he was kind of losing his mind. And so he went to his leadership, Sergeant Green and Corporal Lena, and he told them about what had happened the night before, about seeing the figure that had disappeared and hearing these whispers and the footsteps, and he really thought that he was losing them and needed Flustig to be transferred. And they granted it to him. And the other 7 Marines were really upset about that. They felt like he was kind of abandoning them, and they were really critical of the reason for him leaving. They're like, oh, you're just playing the crazy card. You're just making that up so you can leave this crappy place that we don't want to be here either. So they were not taking seriously what he claimed happened. They just believed he was using the crazy card to get out of being at OP Rock. Just a couple of days after Zolik's departure, Lena is on guard duty in that guard shack, and as he's looking out, Ugly Betty starts barking really aggressively towards the area that Lena is looking at. And so he raises his night vision goggles and he's scanning the mountainside looking for any sign of people that perhaps Ugly Betty has sensed. And he stops when he sees what he believes is a Taliban scout standing on the mountainside, who's pretty far away, a few hundred meters away, and he switches to his thermal scope to confirm that it's a person before he engages. And when he raises his thermal scope, there's nobody there. There's no heat signature anywhere. But Ugly Betty is still barking like a maniac in the direction of where this potential scout was standing. And so Lena goes back to his night vision goggles like a second later, and he's looking, and he sees the same scout now about 100 meters closer to him, way closer to him. Like impossible to cover that distance in that amount of time. He practically falls over when he sees it. He switches to his thermal and he's getting ready to engage, but there's nothing there. And this is all happening in a matter of seconds. He goes back to his NVGs and he's looking and there's nothing there. And as he's about to go to his thermal for one last look, he feels a tap on his shoulder, which he believes is going to be one of the other Marines that must have heard him frantically moving around in the guard shack. And when he turns, there's no one there. There's no one anywhere near the shack. All 7 are asleep in the middle of the camp. At this point, Lena felt bad because he was critical of Zolik, who had left because he had heard voices and seen apparitions out in the distance. And here's Lena, the second in command of the group, having the exact same experience. But over the next 10 days, Hoyt, Smith, and Wilson would all have very similar experiences in that guard shack. And after a while, they all began sharing their stories, and they all realized that Zolik probably wasn't lying, and we were unfair to be critical of him because we've all experienced this now. Then on day 59, the day before they're scheduled to leave, all of their radios go dead. All of them. And Lena goes over to Gibbs, who is their comms guy, And he's like, what's going on? And Gibbs was like, I've been working on the radios this whole time we're here. I've changed nothing. They've always worked. Now, they did have a satellite phone, but it was an unreliable way to get in touch with reinforcements if you really needed it. They're pretty much isolated at this point, and they're all just sitting there, just hoping they can get through one more night without any problems. Wilson is the one actually in the guard shack, and then all of a sudden, machine gun fire opens up right outside of the base. And Wilson is totally caught off guard. He has no idea where it's coming from. He's trying to call it out to the guys where they're getting shot from. And all of the Marines are scrambling to the walls. They're taking cover behind the Hescos. And as they're laying there, Lena runs up into the guard shack with Wilson. And he's like, grabs him and he's like, where are they shooting us from? And Wilson's like, I have no idea. And it's like, it's so loud. There's all this gunfire coming in at them. And as Lena and Wilson are trying to figure out where this is coming from, they hear the distinctive sound of an RPG being fired at them. That's a rocket-propelled grenade. It's like a whistling sound, and they know it's going to hit them at any moment. The two of them brace for impact, and they hear the sound of this RPG smashing inside the OP, and the machine gun fire is just continuing. It's a non-stop. And so a couple of the other younger Marines basically low-crawled their way into the trench where they were protected from these rounds, and they're thinking, like, we got to make sure no one's in the trenches. And so they start clearing the trenches, but no one's in the trench. And it's just this constant barrage of gunfire. They have no idea where it's coming from. And then just as suddenly as it started, the gunfire stops and it's silent. As soon as the shooting stopped, the Marines did not just poke their head up and say everything's fine now. If you're being shot at, you assume that even if there's a break in the gunfire, they're going to start shooting at you again. And so for hours, they're just like waiting for the next round of fire to start, but they don't even know where it's coming from. And they're kind of isolated and exposed. So they're all just kind of like hunkered down against the Hescos, waiting to respond to the next volley of fire. But it never comes. And when the sun comes up, they're able to take stock of the damage to their OP from all the machine gun fire and from the rocket-propelled grenade. But there's no damage. No one had ever been shooting at the OP. There was no damage. So they had no explanation for it. So when reinforcements arrived, they just wanted to pack their stuff up and get the heck out of there. And they did. After leaving OP Rock, very shortly after, Smith, Parker, and Diggs, 3 of the 8 Marines that were there, were all killed in Afghanistan in separate instances. And then Sergeant Green, who was their leader, was very badly injured in an IED blast. Lena believes that when they were digging out those trenches and finding all those bones, that they unleashed something. Turned out a lot of people had lost their lives on that little strip of rock. When the Russians invaded Afghanistan, they captured OP Rock and killed all of the Mujahideen that were located at OP Rock. Then the Taliban came in and they took back OP Rock from the Russians and killed all the Russians that were at OP Rock. Then Americans came in and took back OP Rock from the Taliban, killing all the Taliban that were there. So you have all these people, probably dozens and dozens of people that at one point have been holding OP Rock, that had all been killed at OP Rock. And so Lena believes that it's only a matter of time before this curse that they unleashed comes back to get him. So I'd love to get your reaction. What do you think happened at OP Rock? Is this paranormal, or is there a rational explanation for this? Let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to as many of you as I possibly can. If you enjoyed this story and you haven't done this already, please play Ding Dong Ditch on the like button's house, and then also subscribe to my channel and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly 3, 4, even 5 video uploads. If you have a story suggestion, we have a subreddit just called MrBallen. It's linked in the description below. You can submit your stories there. And if I intentionally use your story, I will certainly credit you. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram. My handle is johnballen416. I'm also very active on TikTok, where my handle is MrBallen. So whether I see you on Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, or here on YouTube, or some combination, I'm just very thankful for your support. And until next time, guys, see ya. When I was in high school, my house was broken into. Luckily, me and my family were out of the house, and the way they got in is we just left the door unlocked. It was just stupid on our part. Someone walked right in, stole some money, some jewelry, and my PlayStation. Now, we were okay, and ultimately, financially, we recovered. But what did not go away was that uneasy feeling of being in a place where the safety, the sanctity of that place had been violated. And for me, I could never get that back. I still, at night, triple, quadruple check every lock in my house. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should live your life in a permanent state of fear that someone might break into your home, but you should never become totally complacent, because somewhere in the world, someone is having their house broken into. It's an unfortunate reality of living on this planet. Now, home invasions range dramatically from something like mine, where no one's home, to way more severe. And so what I've done for today's video is I have found the most terrifying home invasions that I've come across on the internet and ranked them in the top 5. But before we get into the top 5, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to gently give the like button a hug, because honestly, the like button's been through a lot on my channel. It needs a break. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 2014, a 16-year-old girl living in the UK was home one night with her mom, and she was in her bedroom and she was flipping through her phone when she gets a text message. The message was coming from a boy she had recently met via Snapchat. He told her to go to her window and look outside because he was right near her apartment. Now, this girl did not know this boy particularly well, so it was very creepy to be told, "I'm on your property." But either way, she went to the window to look. There's no one out there. And it's late, so she can't really tell if maybe he's hiding or something. But she feels really creeped out by this, and she ends up leaving her bedroom and going into her mother's room and tells her mom, "Hey, I'm gonna sleep in here with you tonight." She doesn't tell her mom about the text message. Maybe she was embarrassed. We don't know. So the girl is laying in bed, her mom's asleep, and as she's about to put her phone down and actually go to sleep, she gets another text from this boy.
"I'm in your house."
She immediately wakes her mom up. She shows her mom's like, "Oh no." She jumps out of bed, every light goes on, runs downstairs to confront this person who's apparently in their apartment, but he's not there. The mother ultimately decides, after not finding anything, that, he's not here. We didn't hear anybody come in the house. The doors are locked, everything's locked. So they did another sweep through the apartment and checked every entrance, locked everything. Let's just go to bed. So they go back into the mother's bedroom, shut and lock the door, and the two of them go to sleep. The next morning, the mother is still sleeping. The girl wakes up a little bit early and she decides to go into her bedroom. As soon as she walked in, she would later tell reporters that immediately she felt like she was being watched. And so she starts doing a cursory check of her small bedroom. She, pulls the door aside, looks behind the door. She opens her closet, pulls her clothes aside, looking around, there's no one in there. And she's thinking to herself, that boy got to my head and I'm psyching myself out. She looks down at her bed, and she used to keep all of her shoes lined up next to her bed. And she was really OCD about how she organized her shoes. And she noticed that one set of shoes was out of place. It was a subtle thing that really only she would be able to recognize. And so she gets down on her knees to rearrange the shoes, and that's when she sees something out of the corner of her eye. Her bed was slightly elevated, and so she had a little bit of a line of sight under the bed as soon as she was kneeling. And under the bed is a face. And it's the face of the boy who had said, "I'm outside your house," and he's the same one who said, "I'm in your house." And he's smiling up at her and he's clutching his phone, looking at her. She runs out of the room. She runs to her mom's room and says, "He's in there, he's in there." The mother comes barreling in, protective mama coming in. The boy's out from under the bed. The boy, in a panic, runs to the window, pulls it open, and jumps out of the window. The boy would turn out to be Kyle Ravenscroft, and he had very quickly become obsessed with this girl. And he just wanted to be close to her. And so when she got that text message that was, "Hey, come look out your window," he was hiding. And when she went into her mom's room, he could actually see her go into the mom's room. because nothing was stolen. There was no sign of forced entry. It was just like someone came in there and wrecked the house and then left. It was very confusing. And so ultimately the police just went back to their precinct to write up the report and told the couple, hey, lock your doors and, be on the lookout for someone trying to rob you again. After the police left, the couple began cleaning up the mess inside of their house. And after a couple hours of doing that, they decided, we'll finish this up tomorrow. They're laying in bed and they start hearing this sound that sounds like an animal dying coming from underneath their bed. Now, they didn't think this could be a person because there was almost no space underneath their bed. It was, barely any clearance under their beds. They're thinking an animal must have gotten in here. We had the doors wide open as we were cleaning stuff out. Maybe an animal got in here. They're like, no, we're not going to deal with this. They jump up and run out of the bedroom and call the police again. Police show up, they go into the bedroom, and there is a person underneath their bed, 90-pound, 27-year-old crazy woman who was high on meth, carrying a knife and a hypodermic needle. And she was under there burrowing a hole underneath the bed. She was the same woman that was on that ID card in the purse that they had found earlier. Her story was she climbed up the tree that was outside the window and jumped into the second floor window while the couple was gone. She ransacked the house for reasons we don't understand and then went under the bed. And there was so little clearance under the bed that the couple did not think to look under there for people. So that whole time they were cleaning up, she was still in the house. Luckily, she didn't get all the way through. Who knows what she would have done if she'd actually punctured all the way through. In 2017, a young college girl who was living alone in an apartment started to notice that something didn't feel right. In the morning, she'd get up and she'd open her fridge, and some of the food that she would leave in there, it appeared like there was less of it. A couple times she would wake up and she'd walk out into her living room, and one of the pillows would be in a different position or had even fallen off the couch. There was just little things happening in her apartment that collectively was actually pretty unsettling and was starting to scare her. And she started having these nightmares at night that someone was breaking into her apartment. One night, she wakes up from one of those nightmares and she's drenched in sweat. She decides she's going to take a shower before she goes back to sleep. She goes to her bathroom and she brings her phone. She would play music while she was taking a shower. She would put her phone right up against the window that was next to the shower curtain, so at any time she could reach over, change the song, and then keep showering. She had a very old door on the bathroom where there was actually a key on the inside of the door that if you wanted to, you could actually lock the door and then take the key out, and the only way to open it again, even from the inside, is with that key. So she's taking her shower, she's listening to music, and at some point she wants to change the song. And so she pulls the shower curtain back just enough to reach her hand out to touch next on her phone when she stops. The phone was reflecting something in the middle of her bathroom, and it was a dark figure standing in her bathroom, shoulders squared up to the actual shower. So someone is standing in the middle of her bathroom facing her right now. I don't know how she did this, but she stayed composed. She retracted her hand, turned the water all the way to scalding hot. She took the shower head out, and once the water was so hot there was steam all over the bathroom. In one fell swoop, she ripped open the curtain and sprayed the water directly on the face of the person standing right there next to her. She runs past this person who's now clutching their face and screaming in pain. She grabs the key on her door on the inside, locks it, takes the key out, runs out of her bathroom, slams it behind her, locking the intruder in the bathroom. The girl runs into her kitchen to get her butcher knife. She had one nice knife, but when she went into the kitchen, her one butcher knife, she couldn't find it. She ditches the idea of getting a knife and instead grabs a towel and runs out of her apartment. She makes it outside. She calls the police. The police show up. The girl gives them the key to the bathroom. They go into her apartment and they unlock the bathroom and they pull this person out. It was this crazy lady who used to live at this apartment, and she had apparently made copies of the keys and had been sneaking in whenever this girl wasn't there, or at night she would sneak into her apartment and she would sleep there on the couch and then leave before the girl woke up. So as the police bring this woman away, one of the officers breaks off and goes over to the girl who owns the apartment, and he holds up an evidence bag, and it's the girl's butcher's knife. The woman had taken it from the kitchen and was standing in the bathroom waiting for her to get out of the shower. And the officer just says, looks like she wanted her apartment back. In 1981, a 9-year-old boy discovered that if he was really quiet He could sneak out of his bedroom at night, go down into the kitchen, and eat as much junk food as he wanted. One night in the summer that year, his family went out for this huge dinner at this amazing restaurant, and when they came back, they had all these leftovers. And the boy really wanted to eat the remainder of the sweet and sour pork. He was really excited about it. So everyone goes to bed, and he's really deliberate. He starts sneaking down the stairs, being ultra careful. He gets to the end of the stairs, hasn't made a sound. And that's when he freezes because he hears what sounds like a fork making a little clinking sound against the counter. And he thinks, my parents have got to be in there. And if they see me, I'm going to be totally busted. So I don't want them to see me. And so he begins to turn his head around the corner because he was obscured by the wall. And he pokes his head just far enough in to where he can see into the kitchen. And standing in the middle of the kitchen is this skinny man that he's never seen before, drinking milk directly from the carton with the fridge wide open. The kid holds back a scream, sneaks back up the stairs. When he finally gets upstairs, he runs into his parents' room and he tells them what's going on. The father runs downstairs, ready to confront whoever's there. There's no one there. There's not even a sign that anyone was there. So they look everywhere and they can't find anything. And so the parents don't believe him. And everybody goes back to bed, and that's that. The boy was very confident at what he saw. Although he did feel like, I guess I could have imagined it, but he started paying really close attention to everything in his house. In the mornings, he would go downstairs before everybody else, and he would see if there was any sign of someone having been in the kitchen. He noticed at one point that the napkin holder had been moved to the wrong side of the counter. He also noticed one time there was a mug that was in the sink that no one had used the night before. And so he's thinking that someone is sneaking into our house. I don't know how, I don't know where, but I'm confident that it's still happening. But his parents didn't believe him. 3 months after the boy has seen this person in his kitchen, he's in his bedroom, he's just laying there, and he's looking up at the vent on his ceiling, an air conditioning vent. And as he's looking at it, he sees a pair of eyes go over the vent, looking down at him. And they blink, and he can tell it's eyes looking at him. It takes him a second to process it, but he freaks. Runs out of his room, runs to his parents' room, and he can barely talk. He's like, there's someone in the vent. The parents run into his room, they check crawl spaces, the attic, they're shining a light into the vent. They can't find anything. And so once again, it turns into, you're making this up, you have an overactive imagination, there's nothing going on in this house. But a week goes by, and their house started to smell really bad. And the majority of the stink was coming from that vent in the boy's room. And even worse, there were maggots falling out of that vent. So they got the air conditioning people over to have a look, and they were totally confident that what they were going to find is a dead animal up inside the vent. But that's not what they find. They find a dead man who had been living in their ceiling. There was literally a cot that had been set up inside of their ceiling. There were drawings of this boy taken from the perspective of looking down at him through the vent. Someone had been living in their ceiling over the boy's bed for months and then died up there. The man was never identified and was buried at John Doe. And I'm sure the parents felt really bad about not believing their son. In 2013, a young woman was living alone in an apartment, and she was on the phone with her boyfriend. As she's chatting with her boyfriend, she decides to go get her mail. She walks into the main hall to this area where all the mail slots are on the wall. She's chatting, she opens up her slot, she gets her mail, shuts her slot, and then she walks back down the hall to her apartment, opens the door, goes back in, and she goes to her bedroom. And she's sitting on her bed, feet on the floor, and she's got her phone, and she kind of tucks it against her shoulder, and she's rifling through her mail. And as she's flipping through her mail, the phone drops. And the way that it lands is it kind of bounces backwards underneath the bed. She puts her mail on the bed and she gets down on her chest to extend her arm out to get her phone that's now well under the bed. And as soon as she starts looking for the phone, she freezes and she stifles a scream. There's a man in the fetal position tucked against the far side underneath the bed, not looking at her. The girl stays composed. She gets her phone. She goes, "Hey, I'm going to take a quick shower. Let me call you right back." With her phone in hand, she walks right out, goes into her bathroom, which is right next door, shuts it, locks it, turns on the shower, opens her window, and jumps out. She was on the first floor. Goes right across the street and hides behind a car, and she calls the police. The police show up, they go inside, and they bring out this crazy, deranged-looking man. As they're taking him away in handcuffs, one of the officers comes over to her, and he says to her, "You're very lucky you did what you did, because we found him in your apartment standing outside of the bathroom holding a knife. He was waiting for you." The girl believes that when she went to get her mail, she was distracted because she was talking to her boyfriend and she must not have shut her apartment door, at which point this guy must have snuck in and gotten in there with it. The man was committed to a mental institution and the girl's boyfriend moved in with her the next day. So I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you haven't already, please gently give the like button a hug because it needs a break. It's been through a lot on my channel. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you have a story suggestion or multiple story suggestions, I created a subreddit on Reddit called MrBallen. It's linked in my bio. You can just go right on there and drop your story suggestions in there. If I use something that you suggest, I will absolutely credit you. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram. My handle is johnballen416. Also, I'm very active on TikTok, where my handle is MrBallen. So whether I see you on Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, here on YouTube, some combination of those, I just really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it, guys. Take care.